101.3 Flirt FM.
You're listening to the Galway Gamer on Flirt FM 101.3. My name is Owen Murphy and I am the Galway Gamer. And joining me on the line is one of the definitive names in esports. Someone who has been on the scene since before the term esports was even a thing. We're talking about a 9-time Evo champion, the one and only Justin Wong. Justin, thank you very much for taking the time this afternoon to come on the Galway Gamer.
No, of course. Thank you for having me. I always enjoy just like doing these, like either like a podcast or like an interview or anything. Like it's always fun. So thank you for having me.
Not a problem, not a problem. It's an absolute delight to have you on the mic. It genuinely is. So let's kick it off then, and let's take it back to the beginning, if you will. When you started getting into fighting games to begin with, when did you realize that you'd have the knack and the skill for the competitive circuit? Because like everybody thinks they're great at fighting games until they meet the bigger fish. When did you realize you were the bigger fish?
Oh man, it's tough because like I was just playing fighting games just kind of like for fun, and I just the whole thing was I just enjoyed like playing different people, right? Playing different people, learning like different skills, different and facing different archetypes has always been such a blast for me. So I didn't think of it as like a competitive fighting game circuit for quite some time, for at least a few years. It was kind of more of like I knew that I was good enough to win tournaments to like win these prize pools. So I guess like I don't know, it's just kind of tough. I just kind of wanted to play because I enjoyed playing, and I guess like it came to a point where like I realized I just kept winning, and then like I started learning different fighting games and winning at those fighting games. So I guess maybe after winning the first like major tournament which was Northeast Championships, that was like my first tournament for Mars Capcom 2 that I won at the age of 14.
Oh wow.
So that's kind of when I realized like, oh, like maybe I can keep doing this, travel around like United States was kind of like my scope to kind of like play other people, and then it gradually went from just traveling around the United States to traveling around the world.
And tell me, how does a 14-year-old get up and go and travel around the United States like that? Was the hassle involved there? Like it sounds like a huge step forward.
I guess there was not many like, I don't know what the airline rules were back in the day, but I definitely was able to fly at like 14, 15, 16, right? By myself. So like there was not many rules back in the day compared to now. But if anything, I took a lot of buses, a lot of Greyhound buses. That was like the name of the name of the bus brand. And I would like kind of like take buses to like Virginia, Chicago, Philadelphia, only in the East Coast, and like Chicago's like probably the farthest I took a bus for, which was like 16 hours.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, there wasn't that many rules back in the day, so you could kind of just, I guess, escape as a kid, which is kind of crazy, and to think about now, like, you know what I mean? But the ease of access of able to just travel was definitely more lenient back in the day.
And you're hitting tournament after tournament then, and this is pretty much the early noughties at this stage. Now, nowadays we're used to seeing Evo as this massive event, thousands and thousands of people in attendance, thousands, maybe even millions watching online around the world. What was this fighting game scene and these tournaments like in those early days, though?
It was definitely nothing like now. Right now, like you said, there's YouTube, there's Twitch, there's social media where people keep updates. Like back in the day, it was like if you're at the event, you get to watch the matches. There was no like top 8 type of thing, no like crowd. You just literally just play, right? It was like so barbaric and primitive of how we used to run tournaments and how to participate in tournaments. And like for Evo, if for example, like there was no live streaming until 2009. So if you were not at Evo, you would have to either wait for a few things. You either wait for like people just posting results on like shoryuken.com forums, or somebody uploading like kind of like those like family camera videos, like with the handy cams and stuff like that, those giant camcorders, or you wait for like a few months for the Evo DVD, because that's what Evo used to do. They used to sell like DVDs of their like top 8 tournaments and everything like that, so people can like experience it somewhat if they miss the matches, right? But the quality in terms of like everything being able like accessible compared to now was just, it just wasn't there. So a lot of times like you had to be at the event to witness the event and to witness the matches.
And when you mentioned earlier on that you liked fighting other people, learning different strategies and so on and so forth, well, how did people learn to play at such a high level? Because nowadays we have, as we mentioned, we have everything at our fingertips. We have YouTube, we can watch it break down into frame data, advanced strategies, everything we need. It's easier to get into fighting games now. But back then, how did people learn about all of these advanced strategies at the time? Was it all community based? Would you talk to your rivals before or after the fights? Would you learn from what they were doing? How did it work?
Obviously, yeah. I mean, it was definitely tougher back in the day. Definitely, like for me, at least from my perspective, like I was blessed with a really good arcade. So there was a lot of good players going to the arcade that even are playing now. Like Arturo Sanchez is one of the players that still play now that was playing before me, and he was at my arcade at Chinatown Fair. And so there was just a lot of amazing players playing all the time at Chinatown Fair. So you kind of just talk with them, right? You talk with them. They explain to you what they're doing and stuff like that. People are just very kind, very nice. Besides that, I used I there was a gaming magazine called Tips and Tricks, and I used to read Tips and Tricks because there was a fighting game section that was like really dedicated to fighting games, and like the person that we used to run that like magazine, like at least like that section of fighting game, was named as Jason Wilson, who was a really old school player and tournament organizer for like the Chicago scene. So like I would learn how to do infinites from that magazine. That magazine would taught me how to do the Gambit Infinite in Marvel's Capcom 1, and I was like, okay, see, that was another way of learning just from reading like Tips and Tricks magazine or Game Pro magazines. But besides that, just talking to people at arcade, and also use your imagination, because obviously there was no training mode in arcade, so I had to put a bunch of quarters in and just kind of like learn these characters as I go, right? Because there was, compared to now, like there's record and playback functions. We didn't have any of that back in the day, but I spent a lot of my time at the arcades, like a lot.
Now, let's move on then to Evo itself. Now, you have won 9 Evos over the years. We're talking, I believe, it's 7 in Marvel Capcom 2, 1 in Ultimate Marvel Capcom 3, and then 1 in Street Fighter Third Strike as well. As I mentioned at the intro, you are pretty much top of the top. You're one of the iconic fighting game players. But unfortunately, a lot of people know you from what is the most famous piece of fighting game footage, and that Evo Moment 37, in which you had your super combo parried by Daigo Umehara, and he returned the favor and got you with a super combo back. Crowd erupted. Now, this is an iconic piece of footage at this stage. It genuinely is. But did this have a negative effect on your career, or did it kind of fuel the fire and fuel the drive to get back out there and get back on top?
Obviously, I don't think it really gave me a negative impact on my life. Just because, like, even though like I was on the losing end, I just think of it as like, at the time I thought it was like super cool. Like I'm just like probably, I think, like a 18-year-old kid at this time, and I thought it was like fantastic. It was like super cool. No one ever seen it. I never ever seen it. And then now you have all these players from like throughout the year saying like I only got into fighting games because of Evo Moment 37. And the fighting game scene is already pretty small. So I don't mind taking the loss or like that have that like being in part of my life because it actually grew the community. Because I would say like during that time frame, like fighting games are kind of like a lot of people were playing less. They weren't that interested. There was no new games because that's kind of the time period where Capcom just stopped making fighting games for like that long period of time. And then I would say that moment kind of rejuvenated a lot of like interest in just fighting games in general, especially Third Strike, because Third Strike wasn't doing as good in North America compared to like just Marvel's Capcom 2, for example. So ultimately, even now up to this day, like people still talk about the clip. People still are get into fighting games because of the clip. You even have like big companies meme on that type of clip. Like you had like Smash Brothers Ultimate when they first introduced parry, right? They had like kind of like a parry moment, and they like used Ken as the character to parry everything. So like they had a bunch of really cool meme things, and I mean ultimately in the end, like I'm just happy that like I was part of history, and I also can bring people into the fighting game space.
That's fantastic. That's a phenomenal mindset. I love that. I absolutely love that. It is an iconic piece of footage. Show. I remember when I first saw it would have been around the time that just about the time that Super Street Fighter 4 came out, and I'd never seen the footage before, and it blew my mind. It genuinely did. I didn't know that level of fighting games existed until I saw that clip. So blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind. But on the flip side of that, then, are there any sets throughout your career that you can go, that was one of my favorites to play, that was fantastic fun? Who do you love going up against?
I would say my favorite set of all time is probably going to be me versus Filipino champ in Evo 2014, the winners finals. Just because like it was like probably the most intense set I've ever been in, because it had like so many clutch moments from both sides, and like like win or lose, it was a blast to play. Like it was like kind of one of those situations, even though like that match would have been the reason of the person winning the tournament. But that was probably like one of the most like hardest and closest sets that I ever played in my life. So I would probably say that one for sure for Evo 2014 for Ultimate Marvel Capcom 3.
Now, let's talk about Marvel Capcom for a moment, then, because while most people might associate you with your Third Strike Chun-Li, you have more Marvel Capcom 2 more so than anything else, championships than most people have had matches. But it's a different kettle of fish. It's a different animal from Street Fighter because it's 3-on-3 fighting. What goes into building a Marvel Capcom team for you?
That's like the $1 million question. How to build a proper team. I think for building a proper team, at least in my eyes, is that you want to have like a good offensive point character, or a good character that's like that doesn't need resources, right? Like as much compared to like other characters. So that would kind of be like the point one. So let's say for Mars Capcom like 2, I use Storm, right? And then you can also, if you want to choose Magneto, those two are probably like the two best point characters, at least from the top tier meta side. But like having like those characters play as point is like very, very strong. So any character that has like options of mobility, doesn't need to like utilize resources, and have a lot of like different type of offensive options are usually good for your point character. Your secondary character is kind of like, I would say, like kind of like the battery. where it's like pretty much like it just uses a lot more resources, but then that's because the point character has built that many resources for you. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like the secondary character, and the third character is like I would say your support character. Usually, like a lot of people have a third character as a support, and then usually that's kind of like your assist character, especially for a team-based game. That's the character that also doesn't really come in unless it's needed, right? So it's not a strong point, and it's not a good battery, but it's just meant to just support both those other characters, which is usually why for like at least Marvel's Capcom 2 or even Marvel's Capcom 3, you kind of want to have them as a good assist character, so you can kind of use the assist a lot more frequently compared to your second character where you can still use your assist, but you have to be careful because if they get hit by any damage, the chances of them coming in with like less life is much more likely.
Excellent, excellent. Well, you've got this just wealth of knowledge at the drop of a hat. You've been in the game for so long in so many different games. Why make the move away from competitive fighting games and toward content creation online? Why make that career shift?
I don't know. It's probably a few reasons. I think the main reason is probably with the world being as it is, the pandemic, right? The pandemic kind of like stopped a lot of things in just everything and just probably in life, right? And then fighting games, at least for the esports scene, for the fighting game side, we strived on offline content, offline tournaments and offline majors, offline invitationals. Like everything was just offline, offline, offline. Even when the developers have like Capcom Pro Tour, for example, or Tekken World Tour, they were all offline based like all the time. So traveling is halted, and then the pandemic was serious. So at least in my eyes, like it was a pretty like kind of, it hurt the FGC a lot. So at least for me, I decided to like, you know what, this gives me more time to kind of like stay home, kind of just like stream, and then maybe start a YouTube channel, right? And that's kind of what I did. Was kind of more focused on just like the YouTube side and also on the Twitch side, and gradually it just kind of shifted that way because we weren't able to go to tournaments for like 2 years. So I just wanted to do something in my, like, I would say professional career that pretty much like says like, you know what, Justin Wong is still doing things, right? Because like besides me just doing content creation, I just I've been enjoying the family life because I have a daughter and a wife, so spending more time with them. Work from home is also pretty nice as well too. So I would say that's kind of the main reason why I just like focused on content creation at home, just because we couldn't travel really. Like I feel like maybe if there was no pandemic, I probably still would be playing like much like harder and stuff like that. But ultimately in the end, it's just kind of like I'm at a very comfortable space now where I could just like, I don't have to worry about I have to win this tournament type of thing now.
That's great. That's absolutely great. Yeah, the pandemic just turned us all ahead. It genuinely did. What would you be playing at the moment if you were still playing as competitively as you were before? I know you still compete from time to time, but if it was still your number one focus, what game would be your current game?
I guess probably be like Street Fighter 5, just because like my like last like big whole like competitive thing was Street Fighter 5, and because I got top 8 at Capcom Cup in 2018. So pretty much pre-pandemic. But besides that, yeah, maybe Guilty Gear Strive, or just kind of the modern fighting games, right? But probably gonna be Street Fighter 5, just because like Capcom does do a lot of like things where they support the competitive scene with like online Capcom Pro Tours, offline Capcom Pro Tours, the Red Bull Kumite, and even Street Fighter League, right? So yeah, I probably think Street Fighter 5 would have been the obvious choice.
And to the younger crowd getting involved in fighting games now, because they've become huge again over the last couple of years, which is fantastic. Let's say over the last decade, since Street Fighter 4 pretty much. to the younger crowd who are just getting involved and just cutting their teeth on fighting games now, would you have any advice for them for getting into that competitive scene, and what kind of mindset they'd need?
I guess like the hardest part about fighting games is kind of like to not be discouraged, because fighting games do they definitely discourage people in general, just because of like, if somebody's like really that better than you, they're really that better than you, and then like you just feel helpless, you feel like, oh, like I suck and everything like that, and then people just don't want to like admit to that or like agree to it. So a lot of times like you just need to make sure that you don't get discouraged and just focus on like perfecting those things, perfecting those weaknesses that you have, and then making sure that you have less weaknesses as much as possible. So like watching your own self playing matches in general, and kind of like analyzing to see like, okay, like why did I do this, why did I get hit, what could I have done better, like asking yourself those questions when watching yourself play or even watching other people play, then it will just help you kind of understand fighting games a lot better.
And where can people keep up with you? And Justin, where can they watch a stream? What is the YouTube channel? Hit me.
You could go to twitch.tv/jwong with 3Gs. You could just search for YouTube and just type in Justin Wong, and you'll just see my channel pop up as like kind of like the first indicator, I believe. You go twitter.com/jwong with 3Gs. Yeah, and then I would say I'm pretty easy to find in general, just because I'm pretty active on social media, and also I post like on YouTube at least 6 days a week, and then I stream every day if I can for a few hours. So yeah, I would say I'm pretty easy to reach.
Excellent. Justin, it has been an absolute treat having a fighting game legend like your good self on the Galway Gamer here. Thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been a blast.
No, of course, man. Thank you for having me.
Flirt FM, Galway's alternative radio station.